everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder, it's time to have a look at another thing that was passed to the developers. Now obviously covering the ground vehicles the other day, there was a key part that I left out, and it was the United Korean Tech Tree. And the reason for this is because I thought it deserved its own video, since it is quite, let's just say, large, and there's a lot of stuff in it, which is kind of crazy. But this was made by Spaminator 500, and I will say there's a lot of copy and paste stuff in here. The top tier seems to be the place where, you know, it's the most interesting, very much like the Chinese tech tree, but we're going to go through it anyway, and if you want a link to the United Korean tech tree, there will be one in the description, so you can have a look at it in full here. We're going to be going through each of the vehicles individually instead of focusing on the tech tree as a whole, because if we do that, I think I'll go insane. And the reason for this is because this whole line here is all patterns, and I've been spading the patterns over the last few months. It ain't too fun. But anyway, let's get into each of the vehicles. So first of all, we have the ROK, or the Republic of Korea vehicles. So let's have a look at what is on offer. The first one is the BTR-80A. Now unfortunately there isn't a photo of the BTR-80A because there seems to be some documentation showing that the Koreans did use it, but unfortunately when it comes to actual pictures, they don't seem to exist. If you want to see what the BTR-80A is, it is of course this wonderful machine right here. It's basically an 8-wheeled machine which has a gun on top of it. Nothing too crazy, but it would kind of be nice to see. Then you have the M8 Greyhound, which was of course used as a cavalry unit during the Korean War, so that was used quite extensively. An M24 Chaffee, everybody seems to have used an M24 Chaffee, and the Koreans were no different. And then of course the M56 as well, showing that the American influence is very strong. The next vehicle is a unique one. This is the K200 KAF-90 right here, and it is a little bit of a chunky boy, but it is also kind of a cool little machine. It's also the basis for a lot of these machines. You'll be seeing this hull quite a lot. It's one of those, let's call it universal hulls, which a lot of different stuff is mounted on it. This is basically a K200 IFV, which has mounted on it the Cockerel 90mm. So the same gun you find on stuff like the Orbal 74 and many others. This one personally never saw active service. It was a single prototype, but the K200 was used a hell of a lot when it comes to Korean service, and it's even used today as a standard IFV. It's supposed to be able to deflect 12.7mm rounds frontally and 7.62 on the rear, so you're not getting any armor out of this thing, but what you are getting is a 280 horsepower engine, a max speed of 74 kilometers an hour, and in this version a 90mm Cockerel, which would be kind of nice. The next machine is the K21 XCB 105. This is a kind of interesting machine. So this was made in collaboration with Dusan DST and also CMI Defense. This is the 105mm version, which was also designed to fire ATGMs, so not just stuff like APFSDS and all of that stuff. But the main thing to understand about this machine is that it had a pretty baller engine. You know, 70 kilometers an hour was its max speed, 750 horsepower engine for the 25-ton vehicle, and also a crew of 3. But its bigger brother is the one to really focus on, which is this big guy right here. And this has a 120mm on it. It's the K21 XC8 120mm. It was mostly the same as the K21 XC8 that we just saw above, the 105mm, apart from the fact that it has a low recoil 120mm on it, and it was designed to fire the GL ATGM with a penetration of 550mm at 5 kilometers. So Basically what they did is they switched production from the 105mm to the 120mm, and also they went onto trucks. So they basically put this gun not just on this platform, but also on other, other platforms as well. And the next vehicle is the BMP-3. Everybody loves a BMP-3, and it comes in two forms. What's kind of interesting is I think what happened here is this got auto-translated because acquired during the brown bear business, and if you don't know what, in quotations, the brown bear business is, the Soviet Union owed a lot of money to a lot of people. It got to a point in the 90s where they were broke. They had lots of kind of assets, especially when it came to the military, but they didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of cash flow. So as it was going bankrupt, the way that the Soviet Union decided to pay its debts was through military aid. So what happened was the South Koreans ended up with stuff like T-80Us and also BMP-3s, which is kind of odd, since of course they are a country which is heavily supported by America. So you end up in this situation where you have a nation in the form of the Republic of Korea, which has not just, NATO vehicles in a way, but it also has Soviet ones. And the BMP-3 is one of those vehicles. It came in two forms. So you have the initial import vehicle, which is the one right here, which has the IR night vision on it and the IR searchlight. Then it has this later version, which is a modernized version, and the main modernization is that it has a gunner's sight with an upgraded thermal optics, the Vesna K. The commander's IR light is the same, but the gunner's IR light has been improved to a newer type. So the main difference is the guiding of the ATGM and also the fact that it has thermals. So yeah, you have two versions of the BMP-3 that could easily be added to this tech tree. Then you have the K21. The K21 is another one of these interesting machines. What you find from it is it's a modified version of the standard K21. It has a 40mm autocannon on it. It has some slat armor and also Raybolt F&F ATGM, which is also available. The front is designed to withstand stuff such as 30mm autocannon rounds, which I suppose is kind of cool. But it's another one of these lightly armored autocannon machines, very similar to the SDRFs that we have in the wonderful Swedish tree. You can also see here that it even has the ability to be amphibious, as long as you put the little, I suppose, drums on the side of it. The next stuff we're going to have a look at is the medium tanks. The first one is the Cromwell 5. The Cromwell 5 was used by the North Koreans in the Civil War. It was used by the DPRK because they were given them by China, and obviously the ROK captured some of them, so therefore, I suppose both sides had them. Then you have the EZ8, the M4A3E8, and this was issued, as you can see, with HVAP to counter the T-34s rather than standard AP rounds. So, this would be slightly different, I suppose. No, it wouldn't, would it? Because I'm pretty sure the EZ8 in-game has APCR. But anyway, it's another vehicle used by the Republic of Korea. Then you have the M26, you have the M26A1, and then you also have the M46. So these would be exactly the same as the ones which you see from the Italian tree and also the American tree. And then we have the M47 as well, which would be exactly the same as the one out of the American tree. And then what we have is the M48. So we have the M48A1, we have the M48A2C, we have the M48A3K, M36, we have the M48A3K, M41, we have the M43A3K, M41E1, we have the M48A5K1, we have the M48A5K2, and then we have the M48A5KW. So a lot of M48s, and as you can see, they seem to have direct upgrades from each other. What seems to be added is stuff such as night vision equipment, and also moving from the 90mm to what looks like either the L7, the 105mm, or even larger. I'm pretty sure it's the L7 which these use, or at least a variant of a 105, which may be homegrown. And I'm sure they also had some engine upgrades. Doesn't look like too much armor upgrades, and also upgrades when it comes to the FCS system. Very similar to a lot of M48s as they go along. So yeah, tons of M48s. Then we have the K1. So if you don't know what the K1 is, the K1 is an interesting vehicle, which would probably be one of the reasons why many people would play this tree. The K1 is a South Korean MBT. It's designed by General Dynamics, and it's based on the M1 Abrams. So this is just a M1 Abrams, but Korean version. And it's one of those pretty interesting vehicles. The K1 originally has the 105mm, and of course it is highly classified. So don't believe any of these statistics that you see in front of you. But yeah, it's pretty much as simple as that. It has APFS DS, it has access to pretty much everything that, you know, the normal Abrams has, or at least it's supposed to, but it's obviously designed slightly different for the Korean environment. Then you've got the K1E1, which is a slightly upgraded version. It has better night vision, and also GPS, friend or phone, improved tracks, and all of that good stuff. So this is just a general improvement on it, and then you could see it as the IPM1 maybe. And then you have the K1A1, just like the M1A1. It has access to the 120mm, which makes it definitely a lot more stronger, and also access to obviously better APFS DS rounds and all of that wonderful stuff. This is one of the main I keep wanting to say Abrams, but I shouldn't say Abrams. This is the MBT that mainly the Republic of Korea uses today, with some heavy upgrades on it. Then you have the T80U, as we talked about before, straight flesh from Russia. So yeah, you have this wonderful machine. So you could technically run a lineup of Korean Abrams and the T80U. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Then you got the K1A2, which unfortunately hasn't been allowed to come through. You got the K2 as well, and the K2 PIP. All of these vehicles are just upgrades of the 120mm Abrams that we've seen. They're all upgrades of the K1 series of vehicles that, you know, we've seen when it comes to this tech tree already, and they're pretty cool, interesting vehicles, you know. But at the end of the day, they're still just very, very similar to the Abrams. I'll try and find a picture of the K1A2, which is of decent size, so I can give you a general overview of it, and you can have a look and see how close it is to its brother. It looks a little bit more squished, I suppose. That would be definitely something to point out, but there you go. There is the K1A2 in its full form, so you can see why American players might be happy with that. And then there's the K2 PIP, which has upgraded with a hard kill, so therefore an APS system to be able to keep it going. Then we have some SPGs from the Republic of Korea. Of course, the M36 makes a return, because of course it does. It was basically used by everybody and their mother, and it has the M3A1 90mm gun, a hull-mounted MG as well, and a roof panel to make sure it doesn't always get killed by stuff like planes and artillery, which would be really nice in the game. Then we have a K200 Metis M. This is just an IFV, which has a which has a tow launcher, basically just sat on the top of it. Well, I think it's a tow launcher. It's some kind of standard ATGM. So yeah, it would be very similar to other machines that we have in the game, which just have launchers on them. Then we have the KW1 MGS. This is the K808 APC with a 90mm cockerel turret on it. So it seems like they tried to add this 90mm cockerel turret to pretty much everything, but this would be a chunky boy with a 90mm. I think it would be alright, you know, it wouldn't be too bad. Then you have the KW2 FSV, and what this machine is, this is a 120mm version, I believe. So yeah, it's basically a fire support vehicle. It's armed with a 120mm, so keep out of the way of this. Very similar to the same ideas behind something like the CV90 120, apart from Korean style. And then we have a bunch of SPAs, so we start off with the M16 MGMC, which is already in game. That is the one with the quad 50 cals. Then you have an M113, which has an M163 weapon system on the top of it, so the Vulcan cannon. The K200, which uses the same turret as the current M163, and then you have the K263A1, which you can see here, uses a modified turret, making the turret profile even larger. This is on that IFV that we talked about before. As you can see, it is very much multi-purpose. Then you got the KW2AA. This is a system which uses two 30mm guns on it, so therefore, you know, it should be pretty good, very similar to something like the AMX-30 DCA. Then you have the ZSU-23-4, probably part of that project we talked about before, so that's a bunch of shilkers that they could have. Then the K30 Baiho, which is an SPAA, which is armed with two 30mm once again, with radar guidance. Then the K31 Chonma, this obviously has access to ATGMs, looks similar to the ADAT system, but there seems to be no gun on it. I couldn't find any actual information on this thing, probably because I don't know its actual name, but yeah, this is just a standard SPAA system, which has obviously the ability to guide in missiles to planes and helicopters. Then you have the K30 combined, so this actually is the basic combination of these two things. What you have here, at least what it looks like, is two 30mm and then some missiles, but maybe they're Stingers. I'm not entirely sure. Once again, the problem with this is trying to find information on this thing when I don't have the actual full name, and also because it's quite a modern vehicle. It's generally kind of hard to tell what is on it, but I'm pretty sure that it has a secondary armament known as the Shingung Manpad, and it's basically a shoulder-launched surface-to-air missile. I don't know what it's based off of, but it seems very similar in characteristics when it comes to the General Stinger. So the next vehicles are from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, so as you know it, North Korea. That was all South Korean vehicles, a massive mixture of American stuff, but on the South Korean platforms. There's a lot of unique vehicles, but which would have a lot of similarities to what we have in game. Starting off with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, you have the PT-76, with of course just the standard 76mm. This is the one with the stabilizer. Then you have the PT-85, which is the PT-76 but upgunned. It is an indigenous modification of the PT-76, as it says. The medium tanks, well, we already talked about the Cromwell that they used from the Chinese, so that's obviously there. And there's a bunch of really nice pictures of there. Then, of course, it wouldn't be, I suppose, a Chinese or a Korean tree if it didn't have T-34s in it. So you got the T-34-76, the F-34 version. This also seems like a really modern picture, by the way. I wonder when they actually use this. Then the T-34-85D5T, which is obviously in the Soviet tree, and the T-34-85 Standard, which is also in the Soviet tree. So yeah, they have all of those vehicles. The Type 59 also makes a thing, whatever it's called. It also also makes an appearance. That is, of course, the T54A, which you can find in the Chinese tree right now. Then you have the T54B, which makes an appearance. It says that it's in-game. I'm pretty sure the T54B isn't in-game. The T54B is a T54A, which is the Type 59, but it's fitted with a new 100mm D10-2S gun, and also a new 2-plane stabilizer. Also it's given a searchlight and a commander's searchlight in later production versions of it, and also it was given APFS DS ammo. So the T54B eventually became a command tank as well once once stuff went a little bit further on in the development. So I don't actually think we have the T54B in game. It's just kind of been left blank. The T55 in game we'll skip. Well, we don't have the standard T55, we have the standard T55A, but to be honest with you, there isn't too many differences with it. The main difference when it comes to the T55A is that it had an improved NBC system. The goal was basically to protect the crew better. It also was given a chemical filtration system, and also stuff such as a different coaxial gun. But if we're talking about in-game systems, it's going to be pretty close. You know, there's not going to be too many difference between a T55A and a T55, apart from the T55 might miss its machine gun on the top of it. So then of course we have the T62M1, which is in game, just got load in BR, might be worth giving it a check. And then we have the Chon Ma-ho. Now, the Chon Ma-ho is every North Korean lover's wet dream. The Chon Ma-ho is their main MBT, which they've used for many years, since the 80s to the present day, and it's one of those things that we don't actually know a lot about. We know its general basis. We know that the fact that it's based off the Soviet T-62, and that there are at least 5 different operational versions of the thing. But unfortunately, it's not one of those vehicles that is really kept. It's kept away from the public a lot of the times. The last time it was seen was in 2010 for the 65th anniversary of North Korea's ruling party. There's supposedly more than 1,200 of these built, and as I said, they've been used for 40 years at this point, which shows that, it's kind of crazy. But the fact is, they basically had a bunch of T-62s, they decided to heavily modify them, and then they decided to build their own indigenous tank, and that is the Chon Ma-ho. So, they could definitely add in a bunch of Chon Ma-hos. As I said, we don't know too much about them. We know for a fact that they have the 115mm, they have some spaced armor on it, they have some composites on them, they have an upgraded engine, but that's really about it. And of course, all of the different Chon Ma-hos have been listed here for obvious reasons. So we got the Ga, the Na, the Da, the Ra, the Ma, and the Ba. Wonderful stuff. If you have any more information on the Chon Ma-hos, good for you, but it is very hard to work out what is different about them. Then we have the SPG line, so we have starting the Su-76M, which of course is already in the game, and then what we have is a bunch of howitzers. So we have the M1972, which is this machine right here. The North Koreans started basically naming stuff after the years that they were actually put into service or produced. I'm not entirely sure which one it is, but you can see that you have the M1972, then you have the M1974, which has the 152mm on it. You got the M1981 with the 122mm on it, and then of course the Su-100, which from Soviet service was used by the DPRK as well. Then you got the M1975, which seems to have a smaller gun on it, and it's a little pea shooter compared to some of these big uns, the 100 and the what looks like 122 and everything like that. Then we have the SPAAs, so we have the Victory Gaz 58, the ZPU-4, which of course has the quad cannons on it, just a truck with not just the quad cannons, but also what seems like some form of ground-to-air missile attached to it. Then we have the ZPU-4, which once again is the quad mounting. I'm guessing these are 23 millimeters, but I'm not entirely sure, so I'm not going to put fact to that. Then we have the 61Ks in the form of the M1985s, which are right here. And then we have the M1985, which looks like a weird conglomeration between Shilkers and also a ZSU-57. Then we have the ZSU-57-2 itself, and then the M1992, which is a Shilker with only 2 guns. And then, of course, you have the Shilker itself, the ZSU-23-4. On top of that, you have the 9K35 Strela 10. This would be pretty broken in the game if this thing was actually added, but it is an option when it comes to it. So let's just find a picture for you of the 9K Strela. It's basically a Sturm S with just very, very good SAM system on the top of it to be able to kill pretty much anything that you see around. So this is what it would look like. It's a point-and-click machine. It would annihilate anything in the air. Then we have the premiums, which are on offer. So we start off with the Katusha, or the BM13 as you may know it. Famous from the Second World War from the Soviets, an artillery rocket truck, which is designed just to flatten an area as it goes. Then we have the K136 MLRS, the BMD-20. It might actually be worth going through the tree on this part, because unfortunately hasn't gone through too much when it comes to the actual pictures of these things. So let's just do that real quick. Right, so as you can see, you have the VTT-323 Type 63. This is a Type 63 with rockets on the back of it. Then you have the M113 Tiger Division. This is an M113 with 2 like 20s on it, I think, or 50 cals. Then you got the BM13, the Katusha, the BMD-20, as if you don't know the BMD series of trucks, plus the rocket systems they have on the back. They are incredibly deadly and also incredibly cheap to produce, so therefore everybody and their mother has one. Then you got the K136 Kuryong, which is kind of a development of the BMD, and then the M48 276, which would be a North Korean captured version. And then if we go back to here, or maybe back to here, let's see. No, we're already here. So unfortunately, these have just not been in, so we can't really comment on them. Then we have the Turan 6. So the Turan 6 were bought from Israel, and they were used basically for testing purposes, so I don't think they ever actually saw official service. You got the PV-1, which is the prototype Abrams, so XM1 vibes when it comes to this. The PV-2, which is the secondary prototype of the K1, which eventually went into service. Once again, having the 105mm gun. Then you have the K200 TOW, which is just the standard IFV we talked about before, but has access to a twin TOW missile launcher, the T-72M1, which once again was sent by Israel to the technical school and is on display over there, so never used in actual service, but I suppose it's nice to have as a bit of history. Then you got the XK2, which is the prototype for the K2, which is of course their modernized MBT, which they easily could use today. And then the T80 UK. So we're going, you know, full on 10.7 for the premiums. Why not? You know, this tree is all over the place anyway, so why not add these? And then you have the Pok Puong Ho, which is same as the Tech Tree Pok Puong Ho, but only one man pad mounted on the roof. You got the Altay, which is a Turkish tank produced with technical support from Hyundai Rotem. I don't know why this is here, but it's here. Then you've got the K2 as well, which is the same machine, which is just sat here as well. So yeah, as you can see, somebody is a real fan of top tier MBTs being being premiums. But you can see you've also got the Chonma 98, which has been missed out, and also the Sandcat Spike Enlo. So if you want to put spike missiles in the game, have fun with that. If you don't know how spike missiles work, I highly recommend looking them up. They would be insane in the game. But yeah, that is the United Korean tech tree as a whole. There's a lot of stuff going on in it. There is a lot of interesting things, and unfortunately the actual United Korean tech tree, like this bit, doesn't cover all of the vehicles that are in here, such as like the MT-LB, but it covers most of them. And if you want to see more information, as I said, just click the link in the description and you can have a look yourself. If you want my personal opinion on it, I'd rather see the unique vehicles of this tree added to other tech trees instead of a full Korean tech tree, mainly because of the fact that they can't produce 4 different tech trees for each of the parts of Korea. A united Korean tech tree just seems ridiculous to me. And also, after China, and after seeing how many people didn't research through it because of the copy and paste nature, I don't understand why we have to do the same thing for this. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Battling Bacon, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Conte Baraka, Daniel Stanton, Elove Goat, Jay Wilt, Martinez, Trigger Hippie, Universe, Eugens Terry, and also I'm Devilish and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.